So I'd like to start by saying thank you, everyone, for joining. My name is Cody Armstrong. Also on with me is Ethan Raito. Ethan will be available for any questions that you have. I'll also be available for any questions that you have, so feel free to type in any questions into the questions dialog in your GoToWebinar control panel. So again, feel free to ask any questions as we're going through this. We like to make these as interactive as possible. So as you can see from the slide, the topic today is what's new in Onshape, and we're going to focus on the most recent update in Onshape and just have a short webinar to discuss all the little things that were added in that update. So what's new in Onshape? Let's dig in. Now, before we get into the topic of the day, there are a few things I'd like to mention about Onshape in general for those new users out there. So if you're new to Onshape, one of the first things I want to point out is our mission statement. That is getting everyone working together with CAD on any device, anywhere. And this includes mobile devices. So if you haven't downloaded the Onshape mobile app, I would definitely recommend it. But also any computer, Windows, Mac, Linux, Chromebooks. You really do have accessibility from anywhere. Now, the other element of that is working collaboratively. With Onshape, you can work simultaneously in the same assembly if you'd like, in real time, and watch it update, across the office or across the world. So everyone working together with CAD on any device, anywhere, that's our mission. Now, the other thing I like to point out is we do consider ourselves professional 3D CAD, and when you think of professional 3D CAD, it's generally parts, assemblies, and of course drawings. They need to have those three pieces. And Onshape, of course, has all major pieces that make up a professional 3D CAD system, but it has a lot of things that really set it apart. And one of the first, and it's definitely relevant to what we're talking about here today, is the frequent updates. So with Onshape, roughly every 3 weeks, you're going to see new features being added. And of course, that's what we're talking about here today. One of these updates added a whole series of new features, and we're going to discuss them in detail. So frequent updates with Onshape, it's not just once a year or once every few months. It's roughly every 3 weeks you'll see a new update. In fact, you're going to see a new update here very soon. Now, in addition to the frequent updates, we also have built-in version control. So if you haven't created a version in Onshape and use things like the compare functionality and all the neat things that come with our data management system, with Onshape, you don't have to have a separate management system for the data you create. All that capability is built in to Onshape's core functionality. Now, also with Onshape comes the ability to import and export common CAD formats. So if you have a library of CAD data, if you have CAD data from other systems, we can import that data and we can export to a lot of common CAD formats that are out there. So if you want to use Onshape as a tool to work alongside an existing CAD system, or maybe a tool for collaborative efforts, you can read in and export out a lot of the industry standard formats that are out there. Now, also with Onshape comes the ability to collaborate in real time. We are a web-based application. This means that if you share your document, you can work with someone else live in real time over the web. And you can work on the same assembly, the same part. You can work in different pieces of it. But the key thing here is you can work collaboratively. Everyone's always aware of what the design is, what the latest version is. There's only one version, and that's the latest. And everyone works on that one version. So it's a bit of a different philosophy, but it really lends itself to true collaboration in CAD. So if you haven't shared your document yet, I definitely recommend it. It's not just the real-time simultaneous editing. It's things like integrated comment capabilities and the ability to see each other's screen with follow mode. So all kinds of very cool collaboration tools have been built into Onshape, really trying to revolutionize that area of CAD. Now, also with all of this comes the ability to build your own custom features and customization with FeatureScript. If you haven't heard of FeatureScript, it's our own scripting language that allows you to build your own custom parametric CAD features. And there's a whole series of custom examples that are out there that you can add to your toolbar today. So true customization with FeatureScript. You can build your own custom automated feature. So all kinds of things I like to point out, and these are mostly geared for those that are just getting started with Onshape, trying to understand, what it is. Now, I mentioned before our update process is a bit different, and unlike a more traditional CAD system where you might have a big, yearly update, Onshape is a bit different. We have incremental updates roughly every 3 weeks. Each one of these updates includes a lot of functionality. In fact, what we're going to cover here today was all included in one update of Onshape, 1 3-week interval update. So a lot of new features are being added at a very rapid rate. So Onshape itself is updated roughly every 3 weeks. The updates are automatic and transparent. So from an end user perspective, you won't see a difference. You log in and new features are there. There's no downloads, no installs, no updates. You don't have to worry about errors or being down. Updates are automatic. And again, you don't have to do anything. Log in and new features will be there. The other thing to consider is with that process, the automatic updates and the transparent updates, it means that everyone is always on the latest version. You never have a version discrepancy. Because the versions are managed internally, you can ensure that everyone using Onshape is always on the latest version. And that's a key piece of, difference, a key difference with us with regards to a traditional CAD system where you might have several different versions and you can't send a file to someone because of, version discrepancy. So with Onshape, everyone's always on the latest version. And again, these updates include new functionality, which is, of course, what we're talking about here today. So, simple introduction into the update process. The goal for today is to go over one of these updates, in particular the update on July 11th. So just recently we had an update. I want to pick a few improvements to walk through. It's going to be a real short webinar. Again, feel free to ask any questions that you have as we're going through this. So we have the questions dialog and you go to webinar control panel. Feel free to type in anything and I'll do my best to stop and address any questions as we're going through this. So that's the goal. We're going to cover one of these most recent updates. And that update, as I mentioned, was on July 11th. So on July 11th, we pushed an update. Again, the users didn't have to do anything. They simply logged in and these new features were added. The first that I want to discuss is section view origin snapping. And this allows you to very accurately, precisely select where you want your section view to be. In the past, you could drag an arrow, but it wasn't a very precise method of locating a section view. So I'm going to do a bit of jumping back and forth between the slides. Forgive me. Let's go ahead and jump out of this and get into a document. And I'd like to give you an example of this section view snapping. So let's select a face and do a section view. And what I can do now, as of this update, is take the center of the section view arrow and actually drag it and attach it to references within the model. And this means that I'm not dependent on that arrow to just grab and drag. I can actually snap it to the center of this cylinder, for example. So it's very easy for me to take the center of the section view and attach it to some reference that I care about. I can attach it to a top edge up here, for example, or, perhaps to the center of this circle. So it's all dependent on what your goal is, but the idea behind it is it will snap to common points that you may want to section to. And it makes it very easy to get it exactly at the center of a circle or exactly at the end or a point or whatever the scenario may be. So if you're looking for a little bit more precise way, I should say, to attach your section views to geometry, this is definitely a useful tool. Right? It allows you just grab that center point and snap to whatever entity that you'd like. Okay? And again, you still have all the control. You can still grab and drag with the arrow, but now this center point can be attached. So that's one of the first and probably most noticeable improvements, especially if you do a lot of section views. That could be a big one. Again, just the ability to snap to entities in the model itself. All right, so let's jump back to our slide. As I mentioned, that was the section view and using the origin of the section view to snap to other pieces of geometry. Now, the next one on my list is a helix from a circular edge. And if you've used Onshape for a while, you'll know that a helix in the past required a cylindrical or conical face, a surface. And this meant that you had to construct a surface or a solid body to use or to create a helix. And the reason was it used the length of the surface to define the length of the helix and so on. Now, what's new with this update is you can now define a helix by a circular edge and number of turns and pitch and height and so on. So you have a set of properties to define the helix length, for example, instead of using a cylindrical face or a conical face. So let me show you what I mean by this. Let's jump into the U-bolt example. Now, in the past, as I mentioned before, if you selected helix, you would have to select some kind of cylindrical or conical face. So here's an example. I would select this face and it generates a helix over that cylindrical face. However, if you don't have an easily definable face to reference, for instance, what if I want the helix to go only 3/4 of an inch down, not down the entire face? This was somewhat limiting, right? I had to have a face the exact length that I wanted the helix. So now the difference is in the drop down, you have a few more options. You have height and turns, height and pitch, and turns and pitch. And so you can define by a few different things. If I define by height, for example, then I can use a circular edge as a reference instead of a cylindrical face. I can select this edge, and I can say I want the height to be 0.75 and the pitch to be, let's say, 1 divided by 12. So now I've defined a helix with a length that I've defined, rather than using the entire cylindrical face. So a big one, if you're doing a lot of helix, maybe springs or threads or those kinds of things where you had to construct, I see a lot of users in the past actually constructing surfaces just for the purpose of a helix. Now you can define using a circular edge and define the height, pitch, start angle, and you can define it a few different ways. You can define it by height and turns and pitch. It's really up to you. Okay. So that is one big improvement to the helix command, is basically the last three options here, and all three of them allow you to define a circular edge as a reference rather than a cylindrical face. And it just simplifies scenarios like this where you may not want a helix along the whole face. All right, so that is an improvement to helix. Let's jump back here. Okay, so a few questions that I see. Forgive me, can we or will we be able to save a custom section viewpoint? You can reference any point when snapping, so I could potentially create a reference and attach to that point. A make connector might serve that purpose as well. So you could accomplish something similar today using something like a make connector or a reference point. Conical helix, yes, you can create a conical helix. You can reference a conical surface to define your helix. Do you plan to add the ability to define a taper for the helix? You can do that today using a conical face. And so what I've seen people do with a tapered helix is just use a conical face, construct a conical revolve with a taper in it, and select that as your reference. Question, how do you draw a spiral groove like a thread? You would be using, essentially, in the case of a thread, a triangle, an equilateral triangle that's attached to your helix, and then swept remove. Okay. All right, so let's move on. The next one on my list is a sketch square, and this is a very simple one, but it makes a big difference if you find yourself doing a lot of simple squares in Onshape, and it's a very simple improvement, and nothing very complicated about it. But when you're in a rectangle command, and I attach my point here, okay, what you'll notice, okay, bear with me for just 1 second. Quick question. I have an application where I need a vanishing helical cut on an existing conical face. I'm not sure what you mean by the term vanishing. Forgive me. Okay, so I select a rectangle and I hold down the Alt key as I'm sketching it. And so really that's the improvement. As you're holding down and sketching a rectangle, if you hold down the Alt key, it will automatically construct a square instead of a rectangle. And you may ask, well, what's the difference? The difference is the equal constraint between the vertical and horizontal references, the lines in this square. So that equal constraint is automatically added if you hold down the Alt key as you're creating your square. Okay, so that's the tip. As you're constructing a normal rectangle, if you hold down Alt, it will make the sides equal, therefore, of course, making it a square. Question. A few questions here. Sorry I'm late, but it just occurred to me for the Helix, could you use something like a sketch circle? I don't believe that would be an issue. Give me just a second here. Yes, that works fine. So just a tip there. I mentioned circular edge. A circle in a sketch also works the same way. By the way, so this is a simple circle that's defined in my Helix. Okay. All right, so let's move on. I mentioned sketch square, and that was the last one. Again, the key to sketch square is using the Alt key. So as you're sketching a rectangle, hold down the Alt key, and it will automatically make the horizontal and vertical references or lines equal, which of course will create the square. And that's just if you're doing a lot of squares, you don't have to go back and then set them to equal. So that's sketch square. The next one is mouse, pan, zoom, and rotate. And I should say rotate, pan, and zoom. So basically your mouse settings. So your mouse settings in Onshape can now be changed. And more specifically, they can be changed to actually match what you may be used to. So this is under your manage account settings. So under your username in the top right, you have manage account. If you go to preferences, you'll see options for view manipulation. By default, of course, when you get started with Onshape, you have your standard Onshape, rotate, pan, and zoom settings. But you can change this to SolidWorks, to NX, to Creo, to AutoCAD. So if you have experience with other CAD applications, or if you're going back and forth a lot between other CAD applications, you can set your zoom, pan, and rotate to something you may be more familiar with. So if you go back and forth with SolidWorks, for instance, you can set this to SolidWorks and you'd have the same settings. So just keep in mind, view manipulation, it's under your preferences, and you can set that so that you don't have, reversed scroll directions or right click, to rotate, those kinds of things. So if you want to change them, you certainly can. That is under, again, manage account preferences. Question: does Onshape have or plan to have a means of showing thread callouts on a drawing? As of today, we don't have a dedicated command for this. I've seen most users construct a note with a leader and attach their geometry or create their thread callout with that note. But a dedicated tool is definitely something that we get asked often and is very high priority in terms of drawings. Question: I've run across issues where I could not rotate, pan, or zoom when set to Creo when a feature requester is on the screen. Sometimes causing me to exit and re-enter the document to fix. If you have a scenario you're running into like that, or any kind of buggy behavior that you can't explain, use the feedback menu under the help command. So under the question mark here in the top right, you have a feedback. Definitely give us that feedback. Perhaps our support team can troubleshoot a little bit further detail. I haven't personally heard of that issue myself, but again, our support team, may have, and definitely use the feedback tool if you have any kind of behavior that you can explain. So, all right. So next question. Yes, but I have a tapered face and tapered angle. I'll need a helix for this cup sweep at a larger taper. The resulting cut is a vanishing helix. Then you would have to construct a surface for the purpose of that larger taper. And it'd just be a matter of literally sketching a revolved surface, for instance, at the taper and angle that you need and referencing that for your thread. Question: do you plan on 3D sketching? Absolutely. That is a high priority for us. All right, so moving on. Let's jump back into the slides here. My next big improvement that I want to point out is the ability to hide highlighted items. And this is one that we got a lot of requests for, and it's real simple. All you have to do is select the Y key on the keyboard. So if I select a part in the graphics and I want to hide it, I click Y and it's hidden. Okay, so let me walk you through this. It's not very complicated, of course, but it's definitely worth showing. Basically, any selected part, if I select this part here and I hit the Y key on the keyboard, it's now hidden. Okay, so very simple. If you're looking for a keyboard shortcut for hide, basically select any part, hit Y, and it's hidden. Now the question then comes up, well, how do I bring it back? Of course, you could do a right-click show all parts. That would bring all parts back. You can also select it and do a Shift Y, which will bring it back. You could select the eye in the feature list. It's entirely up to you. But again, you can even select multiples. So I can select these 3 parts, hit Y, and they're all hidden. Okay. Of course, if I just want to bring them back really easily, I can also do an undo and undo and bring all the parts back. So again, the big thing there is just really that keyboard shortcut and the easy ability to hide stuff. And this is both at the part level and the assembly level in Onshape using the Y key. And again, if you have a part selected in your parts list or assembly instance list like I have here, you can use Shift Y to show it. All right, so that is the hide highlighted items, the new keyboard shortcut. And again, it just uses anything that's selected or highlighted as reference for when it gets hidden. All right, so moving on, the roll to here capability really makes it easy to go back and forth in your feature list. And what I'm referring to is what's often referred to as the rollback bar in other CAD systems, and that is a bar that allows you to roll up and down in your feature list. And roll back to a certain point and then roll back down. And in the past, if you wanted to move it to a certain point, you'd have to scroll down to the bottom, grab the bar, drag up to the point where you want to roll back to, and it was somewhat of a clunky workflow. And it's very common in CAD systems, so I wouldn't say that it's unique either. And what we wanted to do is create a little bit simpler solution to this, and that is the roll to here. And so essentially, what it does is it allows you to select any entity, any feature in your feature list, and say roll to this feature. So you don't have to grab the bar and drag it up and down. I know a lot of users now that will never drag this bar up and down just because roll to here, and then you can right-click the bar, roll to end when you're done. So it's just a really easy way to get in and out of the feature list without having to grab and drag and make sure you get it to right between the two right features. You just right-click and say roll to here. It will roll back to that point, right-click the bar, say roll to end, and it rebuilds everything. So real simple one. Again, this is one of those very small things, but seems to have a big difference in terms of usability for users. Okay, let's move on. The next one, this is another very simple one, but it's the ability to see who else is in your documents from the documents page. And again, a real simple one, but when you're in the documents page and you're just going through your documents, you will now see if anyone else is logged into the highlighted document. So if I select another document, you can see I don't see that visual cue. If I jump down to the Arbor Press, I can see 2 other people are in that document. And so it's easy for me to glance to see, okay, someone else is in it. Maybe I'll jump into it too and add a comment or make some changes or just take a look at the status. So visual cue that someone else is in your document from the documents page. Okay, so all these people that I've shared with, if they were in the document, I would see them in this list. So a visual cue, a social cue, what we refer to as a social cue, indicating someone else is in your document. All right, so moving on. The last thing that I have on my list is actually a few different things. I just ran out of room on this slide. And with a lot of the recent updates, especially over the last 2 or 3 months, the drawings has rapidly progressed. And with every update, essentially we have a list of 5 or 6 separate features dedicated to just drawings. So there are a lot of things. This was no exception. I want to mention just a few of them here and then move on. So a lot of different drawing improvements, as I mentioned before. One of the first that I want to get into, and it kind of ties to a question we got earlier, is what about something like attaching a hole call out for a thread call out in a drawing, for instance. And we don't have a dedicated command for that, but we do have a simple note with leader. And so it's easy for me to attach a note to anything. And with this improvement, we've actually added the ability to allow you to attach it to construction geometry as well. So here's a construction circle, a bolt circle, construction geometry, and I can attach my leader to that. All right, and I can type in my text, 4x, so on. So you can attach notes with leaders to anything, and it's very simple. You can even attach them to construction geometry like I've done here. Okay. So that is an improvement to the note with leader, the ability to attach it to construction geometry. Another one, especially if you're in, doing a lot of geometric tolerance blocks in your drawings, we now have options for all around and all over definitions in your geometric tolerance blocks. So that was a particularly important one for a lot of users, all around, all over, when defining your geometric tolerances. Question: could we have a notification if someone else has been in our document whilst we were offline? If they add a comment, you will see a notification. So if they comment on the document, you will. If they make a change, remember, you can see it in the history. But there's no notification that someone opened a document. Again, you would see the things in the history if they made changes. You would see comments if they had comments, but there's no email process, for instance. What is the status of sheet metal? Sheet metal right now is our biggest priority. We hope to have something very soon. I can't give a specific date. We're hard at work on it right now. Is whole callouts on the radar? I would say absolutely. Yeah, the ability to have automated whole callouts, forgive me, is definitely on our radar. And with all things Onshape, we're moving very quickly. So you're going to see a new update very soon with new features being added to it, and so it's often a process of maybe weeks to months and not years for these new things to come in. Is there a way to represent threads without actually modeling them as solid features like cosmetic thread option? What I've seen a lot of users do in those scenarios is just use a helix. We don't have a dedicated button for cosmetic thread, so to speak, but using a helix, it can accomplish something very similar without actually having to model the thread. Is two-way associativity for sketch and drawing dimensions on the way anytime soon? It's that way today. When you change a dimension in a part, you'll get a notification here to update. And you hit update, and it will automatically update all the dimensions in your drawing. So the associativity between drawings and their parts or assemblies is there today. You will see a little notification when changes happen, and you'll need to click the button to refresh. Forgive me. That is one way, not two way. That's correct. You cannot change the dimension at the drawing level. Forgive me. So yes, you are correct. You cannot do that. As for whether that's on the radar or not, I don't believe that may be on the short-term radar, but definitely let us know if that's a high priority for you. Use the feedback tool and let us know that that's a high priority for you. Can sketches be done on a 2D drawing? You do have basic sketch tools. You have essentially a line command. We don't have a dedicated sketch environment for the drawing level. That's really intended for the Part Studio. Okay, so I mentioned the ability to attach notes with leaders to construction geometry, and it could be construction lines, it could be construction circles, like I've got here. All of that is now supported. It will now attach to that geometry. The next thing I want to mention, I mentioned also the all-around and all-over GD&T leader options. The last thing I want to mention with regards to drawings in this update is the tooltips. As you mouse over a particular dimension command in the toolbar, for example, you'll now see tooltips that fly out. And this is to make it more consistent with the Part Studio and assembly. So if I were in a Part Studio and I mouse over a feature, it's going to give me a big tooltip explaining what that feature is. Now you have the same behavior in the drawing level. As you mouse over a tool, stay there for a moment, you'll see a bigger tooltip that appears, explains what that command is. Again, if you're not familiar with it, just move your mouse over a button, leave it there for a moment, and you'll see that tooltip pop out. And so those tooltips are new with this update, and it's, again, to make it more consistent, to keep up with, to make sure that the experience is the same between Part Studio's assemblies and, of course, drawings. All right, so there are a few questions here. Rebuilds and drawing updates often take a bit of time, not prohibitive, but a nuisance. Is that on your end or my end? The rebuild time is definitely something we're working on in particular to improve the performance of. It could be a combination of both ends, to be honest. It's more likely a regeneration issue on our server end, which is something that's easy for us to improve, and it's something that I know that we're working on. So just, sit tight. We're working on it. We're aware that, rebuilds can take a bit of time. That's something that we're working on improving. Can I place a hole in a curved surface? I have been having difficulty with this. What I would recommend in those types of scenarios is construct any point above that that surface, and it could be anywhere above the surface. And then, as long as the normal direction of the point is right, you can select that point. It will find where the hole intersects with the surface. So I forgive me, not without looking at the specifics, I would definitely recommend, inserting or creating a plane above where you want the hole, and then, use your point there, and then create the hole from that point. You do not have to insert a point exactly on the surface. Does the update show which dimension changed before updating? I do not believe so. I do not believe I can visually see. I can see... No, I take that back. If something changes in the model, you will see... If something breaks, for instance, you will see an error. The dimension itself will turn red. So if I dimensioned to an edge, for example, that no longer exists, that dimension will quote-unquote break. But it doesn't highlight which values changed when you click update. So I see you're using Chrome browser on a Mac. Is Chrome somehow better than Safari? No, it's just a matter of personal preference. I personally like the Chrome browser. We have a lot of users, even internally in Onshape, that prefer Safari. So it's more a matter of preference than anything else. I don't know that there's a huge difference in terms of performance between one and the other. Okay, so we've covered the drawing improvements that I wanted to mention. I've already covered many things that were out with this update. I really do have, just one last thing to point out to you, and is particular with regards to feature script, and if you're using feature script features. So in my toolbar, you'll see I've added a few custom features. And if you're not familiar with custom features, you can add custom features here and browse for all kinds of, custom feature script features for building all kinds of neat things. But once you've added them to your toolbar, oftentimes what you'll want to do is reference them, or at least take a look at the document that is used to create these features. So I can right click and I can say open the linked document. So with this update, I can say open link document, and that will take me to that custom feature. So maybe I want to look at the source code for it, or look at maybe the example or the instructions that came with the custom feature. I just want to figure out how to use it maybe. The right-clicking the button, opening the link document, will take you to the document where you have instructions, you have examples, you have the source code. So again, just right-clicking any custom feature, you'll see that open linked document button there. All right, so that is the list that I had to show you here today. I do have one more slide for you, so bear with me. Real quickly, going forward, if you haven't already, we really encourage you to try Onshape in a professional job, a professional project, and give us your feedback. I showed you the feedback tool a moment ago under the help menu. We'd really like users' feedback. We're at a very important stage where everything is taken very seriously. We really encourage you to give us any feedback that you have. So definitely let us know what you think. Also, invite others and share. I mentioned it before. If you shared your document, you can see each other's screen in real time. You can add comments inside the document. You can collaborate in real time. Now, by default, everything that you do in Onshape is private to you. But if you share, you can, have all the benefits of working collaboratively. You can assemble together. You can work on the parts together. So a lot of benefits come from sharing your document. Also, if you're interested in establishing a user group or maybe meeting local users, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to help you set things up. So that's what I had planned. I know there are a few questions, so bear with me. Forgive me, I'm going to get to those in just a moment. But that's what I had. So thank you, everyone, and have a good day.